You're sitting in a cave. It's roughly 100,000 years ago. The fire is low. The day's hunt is done. Someone in your group, maybe the guy who's always a little too confident, just slipped on a wet rock. He went down hard. He's fine. He's scrambling back up, looking around to see who saw it. And the group loses it. Not politely, not with a little chuckle. Full body, uncontrolled, can't stop it laughter. The kind that makes your stomach hurt. And your eyes water. Your whole body shakes, like something short-circuited in your brain. Here's the thing nobody thinks to ask. Why? Not why did they laugh at the guy falling. That part makes sense. But why does any of this happen at all? Why does the human body have a dedicated response? Involuntary, physical, loud, and completely out of our control? Specifically for moments like that one. What evolutionary pressure looked at our ancestors and decided that what they really needed was to occasionally lose the ability to breathe properly because something struck them as funny? Laughter is so woven into human life that we treat it like furniture. It's just there. It's always been there. You don't think about it until someone points out how genuinely strange it is that a species capable of building cities and splitting atoms also makes a weird repetitive noise when a cat falls off a counter. And the moment you actually stop and look at it, really look at it, laughter becomes one of the most fascinating and least understood behaviors in all of human evolution. Here's what we know. Laughter predates language. It predates civilization. It predates agriculture, pottery, writing, religion, and every other thing we typically point to when we talk about what makes us human. The evidence for this is sitting right in front of us and has been the entire time, in the form of our closest living relatives. Chimpanzees laugh, gorillas laugh, orangutans, bonobos. All of them produce a vocalization during play and tickling that is functionally, acoustically, and neurologically connected to what you do when something catches you off guard and your brain just lets go. That means laughter isn't something humans invented, it's something we inherited. And whatever it was doing for our ancestors before we were even fully human, it was doing it well enough to survive millions of years of evolution completely intact. So what was it doing? What made ancient humans laugh? And why did that matter enough for the behavior to stick around? The answer is stranger and more interesting than you might expect. And it starts not with humor at all, but with safety. Scientists have a word for what chimpanzees do when you tickle them. They call it pant laughter. And if you've never heard it, go find a recording right now because it will immediately break your brain a little. It sounds close enough to human laughter that your gut recognizes it before your brain does. Not identical. Slightly off, like a cover version of a song you know well. But unmistakably the same thing. The same rhythm, the same loss of breath control, the same social context. Two chimps playing, one gets tickled, and out comes this sound that your nervous system registers as laughter before you've consciously decided what you're hearing. That's not a coincidence. That's lineage. Neuroscientists who study laughter have traced the behavior to one of the oldest parts of the brain. Not the cortex, not the sophisticated neuroarchitecture responsible for language and planning and abstract thought. The brainstem, the part we share with creatures that were crawling around long before primates existed. Laughter, at its neurological core, is ancient hardware. It runs on systems that were already old when our ancestors were still living in trees. Here's the biology. When you laugh, your respiratory system essentially hijacks your breathing. You lose voluntary control. The exhale gets chopped into short, rapid bursts. Your facial muscles contract involuntarily. Your body releases endorphins and dopamine, the same reward chemicals associated with food, sex, and social bonding. And here's the part that most people never think about. You cannot laugh alone and have it feel the same. The neurological payoff of laughter is dramatically amplified in the presence of other people. Laughter is social by design, not by accident. Researchers at University College London found that people are approximately 30 times more likely to laugh in social situations than alone. 30 times. That number is not a rounding error. That is a biological directive. Your nervous system is specifically calibrated to produce this response around other members of your species, and to produce it far less when you're by yourself, which tells you something important about what laughter is actually for. It is not primarily a response to humor. Humor is what we layered on top later. At its core, laughter is a signal, a broadcast, a piece of social information sent from one nervous system to another that says, in the most compressed possible form, I am not a threat right now. This moment is safe. You can relax. We are okay. That signal, in a world where misreading another person's intentions could get you killed, was not a small thing. It was infrastructure. So what actually made them laugh? Not jokes, not stand-up comedy, not irony, not the kind of layered cultural humor. That requires shared context and a certain amount of leisure time. Ancient humans didn't have any of that. What they had was each other, a physical world full of surprises, and nervous systems wired to release tension through a specific involuntary sound. And it turns out that combination produces a remarkably consistent set of triggers across every culture ever studied, including the ones that had zero contact with the outside world. Anthropologists who have studied isolated communities report the same categories of humor, showing up independently everywhere. Physical mishaps, unexpected sounds, someone being caught doing something they shouldn't. The gap between how important a person thinks they are and how they actually look in a given moment. These aren't jokes, they're situations. And they're funny across every language, every continent, every level of technological development, because they're triggering something that exists below culture entirely. The leading scientific framework for why things are funny is called benign violation theory. The idea is simple and surprisingly powerful. Something becomes funny when it violates your expectations, in a way that simultaneously registers as non-threatening. The guy who slips on the wet rock is funny, because the fall is unexpected. It subverts his dignity, and he's fine. Remove any one of those elements, and it stops working, if you saw it coming. Not funny. If he actually got hurt, not funny. If he had no dignity to lose, significantly less funny. The formula is remarkably stable, across human populations, and remarkably old. But laughter in ancient human groups was doing something beyond just marking funny moments. It was doing serious social work. Primatologists studying group dynamics in both chimps and early human communities have found that laughter functions as a social equalizer. When a high-status individual does something ridiculous and the group laughs, it briefly compresses the hierarchy. It reminds everyone that nobody is so important, they're immune to looking stupid. That release of social pressure was genuinely valuable in groups, where tension between dominant and subordinate members could tip into violence. Laughter was also how ancient humans played. And play, for social mammals, is not optional. It's how young animals learn to read each other, test boundaries, build trust, and practice the social skills they'll need as adults. The laughter that accompanied rough and tumble play sent a continuous signal. This is not a real fight. We're still safe. Keep going. Without that signal, play tips into aggression. With it, the group gets stronger, more cohesive, better at being a group, which in a world where being a group was the difference between surviving and not, mattered more than almost anything else. Here's the part that should stop you for a second. Every time you laugh at something stupid on your phone at midnight, every time a whole table loses it at dinner over something that isn't even that funny but somehow becomes funnier the longer it goes, every time you and one other person make eye contact after something absurd happens and just go, you are doing something that is at minimum 100,000 years old, probably older. The neurological hardware running that moment in you is the same hardware that ran it in a group of early humans sitting around a fire on the African savannah, processing the day, bleeding off tension, signaling to each other that the world was okay for right now. That continuity is almost impossible to fully absorb. Language changed, religion changed, technology changed so dramatically that someone from 10,000 years ago dropped into the present would be functionally unable to process what they were seeing. But laughter? Laughter looks the same, sounds the same, does the same job. A researcher studying ancient human social behavior and a comedian bombing on stage in front of a quiet crowd are working with the exact same biological material, just from very different angles. What we still don't fully know, and this is worth sitting with, is where exactly the line is between the laughter we inherited and the humor we invented. Chimps laugh, but they don't tell jokes. They respond to physical surprise and social play, but there's no evidence they construct situations designed to be funny, no evidence of anything like a punchline, no deliberate subversion of expectations for effect. At some point in human development, something shifted. We stopped just reacting to funny things and started creating them. We started telling stories designed to build and then break tension in a specific way. We started doing impressions and callbacks and the oldest form of observational comedy, which is basically just pointing at something everyone experiences and saying out loud what everyone privately thinks. Nobody knows exactly when that happened. There's no fossil record for a joke. But by the time we have written language, humor is already fully formed and surprisingly modern. The oldest written joke ever recorded comes from ancient Sumeria, around 1900 BC, and it's a crude pun. The second oldest is an ancient Egyptian joke about a pharaoh. People were already doing bits. They were already playing with language for laughs, which means the cognitive leap from reactive laughter to constructed humor happened somewhere in the vast, unrecorded stretch of time before writing. Carried forward not in clay tablets, but in the only medium ancient humans had. Live performance, around a fire, in front of an audience that would let you know immediately whether it worked. The next time something makes you laugh without warning, before you've decided whether it's funny, before your brain has caught up to your body, that's the old system firing. That's 100,000 years of social wiring doing exactly what it was built to do. Recognize safety, signal connection, pull the group together. It worked then, it's working now, and somewhere in that fact is something genuinely worth laughing about.